There are so many reasons why the MCU hasn't been the same since Endgame. From production and creative issues to legal battles and casting problems. I know you've all felt that post-Endgame, things fell off, but you probably don't know just how many issues there really are. And that's what we're getting into today. So how exactly did Marvel ruin the MCU? Connected stories. The Infinity Saga had one thing the Multiverse Saga just did not. Connected, serialized character arcs transported to the big screen. When you watched The Winter Soldier, you knew it was just one chapter in a much larger story. If the story suddenly shifted to the Guardians, you were sure that they'd come back again. By the time Tony Stark sacrificed himself in Endgame, he had played an active developing role in 9 different movies. Over the course of the first 12 MCU films, Iron Man, Cap, Thor, and Black Widow appeared in at least 4 projects each. You were invested because the characters were actually present.
No, it's not like a person lifting the hammer.
Right. Different rules for us.
Nice guy, artificial.
You saw Tony go from the Merchant of Death to the hero of the multiverse. You finally saw Cap put down the shield and choose a life for himself. Each of these characters grew alongside the Infinity Saga, and the connection with the audience was natural and organic. And that's because they got the chance to connect across 6 films per phase that each focused on individual characters while building a central narrative in the background. Each film introduced a new Infinity Stone, or introduced us to a classic yet new aspect of the Marvel Universe, like Asgard. And each phase capped it off with an Avengers film. In total, across phases 1 and 2, you had 12 projects. And let's compare that to phases 4 and 5. You had 20 plus live action projects from Black Widow to Ironheart. And that isn't even counting all the animated shows on the side. Out of all of these, the most prominent recurring character was Yelena Belova, and she's only appeared in like 3 of them: Black Widow, Hawkeye, and Thunderbolts.
Hi.
Marvel totally abandoned interconnected storytelling. They introduced characters like Shang-Chi and Moon Knight only to leave them sitting on a shelf for half a decade. Instead of building a core cast, they focused on mass content generation. And that's not a fan theory. It's something Disney CEO Bob Iger confirmed himself. And this wasn't a strategy by Marvel. It was a mandate by Disney. They had to compete with Netflix. So the goal for Marvel Studios was to become a content factory, to pump out as many films and shows as possible.
Marvel's a great example of that. They had not been in the TV business at any significant level. Not only did they increase their movie output, but they ended up making a number of television series. And frankly, it diluted focus and attention.
Whether they believed the Marvel logo would sell numbers or that constant output was the move, it failed pretty badly. Instead of a digestible 6-movie format that allowed the overall narrative to breathe and really build, we had a bunch of scattered movies and shows that people struggled to keep up with and remember. And honestly, it's not even the quantity. The quality also suffered badly. Compare this to Kevin Feige's time, where he worked on each film with an attention to detail and a commitment to building one central story. And Kevin himself agreed, admitting in an interview with Entertainment Weekly that hitting the cultural zeitgeist is almost impossible when there's so much product and content being dumped on the audience. Marvel traded the meticulous serialized character arcs that built their empire for an oversaturated release schedule to prop up a streaming service, and the narrative immediately fell apart. Dead ends. Now, I'm not saying the Infinity Saga was perfect, but at least post-credits mattered. I mean, the MCU was built on a foundation of trust. When a post-credit scene teased something, you knew it was a promise that was going to be kept. Iron Man 2 teased Thor's hammer, and we got Thor as the next film. Age of Ultron teased Thanos, and we got Infinity War as the next Avengers. But in the Multiverse Saga, that trust is completely broken. Out of the 14 projects in Phase 4, less than a third of the post-credit teasers have actually gone anywhere. Yeah, we haven't seen this guy since.
Your friends are in big trouble. And we know where to find them.
And it's the same for Shang-Chi, who hasn't appeared in a project ever since his debut movie. Worse, the movies themselves feel like narrative dead ends. Black Widow was a prequel devoted to a character who was already dead. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was a masterpiece, but it was the end of the Guardians we had kept up with. Quantumania spent its entire runtime setting up Kang, and well, let's not even start on that. This was supposed to be the next big bad, and then he's taken down by Ant-Man?
And you're not getting out.
That connected story structure went out the window, and it became hard to take these movies seriously as pieces of a larger puzzle, because what are they really building up to? And this was directly tied to the fact that behind the scenes, the writers were really disorganized. Take WandaVision, for example. Wanda pretty much had the same character arc in both the show and Multiverse of Madness. And that's because the writers weren't even clued in about what was going on in WandaVision. Director Sam Raimi even confirmed this to Rolling Stone, admitting he never saw the whole show, only key moments. That kind of disconnect between the directors, writers, and core projects is a recipe for a saga that isn't as tightly woven as the one before it. Marvel basically didn't have a larger plot in mind. And it's not just these two projects. The same thing happened with Daredevil Born Again. The show's season 1 went through massive creative overhauls, with writers being fired, a season being scrapped halfway through, and multiple reshoots. And forget having a disconnect. They seemed to let go of the concept of showrunners entirely. So they were essentially raw dogging some of the biggest projects, then wondering why things didn't pan out too well. So not only did they let go of the story structure that worked so well in the Infinity Saga, but the stories they are telling seem to honestly not lead up to anything, despite trying to. The first time we got a look at Thanos was in the first Avengers. The first time we saw Doom, the Fantastic Four, which is set on an alternate Earth, and it comes nearly 24 movies in. Also, before, you just had to get through one phase to follow the story. Now, it feels like homework. The Disney Plus dilemma. What do I mean by homework? For the first 10 years of the MCU, you only had to watch movies to understand the movies. But in Phase 4, Marvel started treating their massive blockbusters like season finales to television shows that half the audience hadn't watched. Take Miss Marvel, for example. It had the lowest viewership of any live-action MCU premiere in Disney Plus. Despite that, Marvel made the character a lead in a $200 million blockbuster. And the result? The Marvels suffered the worst box office opening in MCU history at $47 million and became one of the lowest grossing films in the history of the MCU. So, not only were there a considerable number of people who left the Marvels feeling a bit lost, but tons of people didn't buy a ticket at all because they hadn't done the homework. Do you see what I mean? And even in the case of successes like WandaVision and Doctor Strange 2, the gap is really sizable. While WandaVision had around 20 to 25 million domestic viewers, Doctor Strange 2 grossed nearly $1 billion and hit 37 million tickets domestically. That's millions of people who walked into a Doctor Strange movie and wouldn't have known why Wanda went from fighting Thanos to turning Mr. Fantastic into string cheese. During the Infinity Saga, keeping up with the MCU was really easy. You just had to go to the movie theater a few times a year and you were set. At most, you needed to watch a YouTube video explaining all the post-credits, like the one we did. But in the Multiverse Saga, it's a whole network of movies, one-offs, animated shows, and more. You needed a permanent Disney Plus subscription and dozens of hours of your free time. It transformed the MCU from a fun cinematic escape into a literal chore. Plus, let's say these services weren't available in your country, or a torrent wasn't out, or a website was down. What were you going to do? There was also massive genre whiplash. The Infinity Saga was largely built on a consistent tone of action-adventure. You had a basic skeleton that each movie followed. There was some character work.
Thank you for saving me. Don't waste your life.
Which eventually paid off.
I came to realize that I have more to offer this world than just making things to blow up.
Then there were a couple of big fights and a massive showdown at the end of the film. Let's say you're a fan of grounded street-level stuff like Daredevil. You want to keep up with what Matt's been doing since season 3 ended, but to do that, you need to watch She-Hulk.
You need to back off.
And waste this outfit?
A fourth-wall-breaking legal comedy that barely has any action, but it does have a Megan Thee Stallion twerking scene? Whatever that's worth. And let's say you even sat down to do all of that. Then you'd have to deal with things like Secret Invasion, which killed people off for no reason. There might not be many Maria fans out there, but that doesn't mean you get to do her dirty. Marvel marketed this show as a massive crossover event that would set up a lot of the Multiverse Saga, and fans tuned in. But what they got was a half-baked story, a confusing CGI sludge fight, Skrulls taking over everyone, even Rhodey. The new Trinity. Despite how it seems so far, Marvel did actually have a plan post-Endgame. They'd chosen their replacements for Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor, the big three of the Infinity Saga. They had even spent many movies building them up, and the idea was to build the multiverse saga around the new Trinity.
I like this one.
Spider-Man, Black Panther, and Captain Marvel. But almost immediately, that plan was destroyed, and it wasn't entirely Marvel's fault. The first terrible stroke of luck was the passing of Chadwick Boseman, the Black Panther. They had built him up in Civil War, his own standalone movie, and he played a pivotal role in Infinity War as well, making him a core member of the cast.
Just like reminding that if Chadwick Boseman were still alive,
Yeah.
the current Marvel moment would look very different. Like, sort of with, sort of like Downey and Evans and other people retiring, I think he would have stepped forward to be the face of the MCU. And that was something they were counting on that, for like tragic reasons, like isn't going to happen.
The second was the rights issues with Sony regarding Spider-Man. In August 2019, just weeks after Far From Home hit $1 billion, Sony and Disney had a massive public fallout over co-financing. It was their most successful movie to date. There was no way Sony was going to pass up this cash cow. For an entire month, Spider-Man was officially kicked out of the MCU. While the studios eventually signed a new temporary deal, the damage was already done.
Most of us who care know that at one time, Sony, which owns the rights to Spider-Man, was pulling Spider-Man out of the Marvel universe, and it was terrible.
Marvel Studios realized they could never make Peter Parker the central face of their universe because Sony owned the rights and could pull him away at any second. He just wasn't as reliable as Downey Jr., Evans, or Hemsworth, all of whom signed multi-film contracts with the MCU. Next, the Captain Marvel pillar collapsed. Despite her first movie making over $1 billion, the character faced a relentless wave of toxic online backlash. And honestly, I get it. People were sending her all kinds of hateful comments. Man. From review bombing the Marvels to constantly degrading her past works and skill as an actor. At some point, it takes a toll. And on Brie, it clearly did. When she was interviewed about playing Captain Marvel, her response was crystal clear.
How long will you play Captain Marvel for?
I don't know. Does anyone want me to do it again?
Don't be so modest.
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't have the answer to that.
Joanna Robinson, who co-authored the book MCU, The Reign of Marvel Studios, which was an exhaustive live account of the behind the scenes of the studio, also confirmed that the negative fan reception really took a toll on Brie Larson. Now, the new big three was in shambles. One actor didn't want to do it anymore. Another couldn't be recast out of respect for his iconic role. And another was tied up in legal issues that haunted the Spider-Man IP. What did that mean for the movies? There was no trio of characters with the same pull or weight as Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor. Nobody who could be the face of the MCU going forward. Production collapse. Now, on top of everything so far, not having a cohesive plot, dead-end stories, and a host of actor/rights issues, the production process was also doomed from the get-go. Marvel had been burning through money throughout the multiverse saga, and this is because they kept rushing into production without finished scripts. I mean, obviously, if Disney tells you to start pumping out 3 movies or more, plus shows a year, you're not waiting around for a script. But the biggest proof of their horrible production? Just look at the budget costs. Secret Invasion, a 6-episode television show that consists mostly of people talking in dimly lit rooms, cost $212 million to make. Quantumania reportedly had a $330 million production budget because of pandemic issues and endless reshoots. And by the way, just for reference, that dwarfs the budget of Barbie and Oppenheimer, 2 of the most successful films recently. That's $250 million on one of their worst performing shows ever. It caused Marvel to deeply reconsider their entire strategy. But where was all that money even going? Like I said, on constant, endless reshoots, entire third acts of big blockbuster films were being reshot. Jeff Loveness, the writer of Quantumania, openly admitted in interviews that they completely changed the ending of the movie in reshoots. Originally, the idea was that Scott and Hope were going to be trapped in the quantum realm, letting Kang escape. And what we got was actually because they panicked. They didn't trust that ending enough, so they reshot it to one where Ant-Man and his daughter beat the big bad Kang, who in the comics has been an Avengers-level threat and beyond.
You're an Avenger. Have I killed you before?
We got a happy ending that totally ruined Kang as a future villain. Plus, the VFX side of it was even messier. In a 2022 expose by VFX artists who worked on Marvel projects, the working conditions were beyond abysmal. No other big-name producer was handling things this badly. From this article alone, we heard about 64-hour work weeks, constant overtime, literal staff members having anxiety attacks over the phone for something that's about superheroes. This sounds pretty evil. Plus, these guys weren't even working with proper staff. And when so much is fundamentally wrong with the creative and technical process, it's not hard to figure out why these movies haven't worked out as well. The thing is, Marvel really used to have an iron grip on this stuff. A predictable release schedule, a writer's room full of people who were creating one gigantic story, something never before done in cinema history, and a properly staffed and equipped team. The bulk of their problems started with the extreme focus on quantity, but everything since has been an equal mess. It's really hard to look at one of your favorite franchises be handled so poorly, but the behind the scenes of Marvel Studios has been a much bigger villain than Kang or Thanos ever hoped to be. Luckily though, they seem to be returning to form, with great releases like Shang-Chi, Wonder Man, Daredevil Born Again, yes, despite the overhauls, Deadpool and Wolverine, Fantastic Four, and now Brand New Day, which honestly looks amazing. Here's hoping Marvel gets their act together, because the potential was always there. The process just needs to be better.